Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are back in Scotland. As you might be able to tell from the change in background, I'm back home for a friend's stag do and also for a friend's 30th birthday, and I'll be back home again in a few weeks for the wedding for that friend as well. So as we always do when I'm back home in Scotland, we're going to film some Scottish beer reviews, and I've got a few German and Belgian things to work through while I'm here as well. So I hope you enjoy this little Scottish mini-series of reviews that we're going to do over the next little while. But to kick this off, as we always do, we are going to start with a Scottish beer. For this one, we are returning to a brewery that's featured on the channel a good few times before. I've had some really nice beers from them over the last year or two. They are still a relatively new addition to the Scottish beer scene, of course, and I would say that they're best known for their different kinds of sessionable beer, you know, pale ales and lagers and stuff like this. But the particular beer style that we're having a look at today is one that I very much enjoy, but not one that I get to review on the channel all that often. But recently I did actually get a little bit more familiar with it because one of my subscribers lives in the local area where this beer style is from, and he sent me a bunch of local ones, and it was really great to get a little bit of a kind of deeper knowledge of this style actually. So I'm very curious to see what this particular example is going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head through to Edinburgh once again. We're going to go to Leith to be specific, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Newbarns Brewery. So this particular beer is called Chevallier. It comes in at 4.4% ABV, and this one is a Vienna lager. So yeah, when I think about it, I believe that this might be only the second or maybe third Scottish brewed Vienna lager that I've ever had, but apparently this is another one from their Heritage Grain series at Newbarns. This one is brewed with Chevallier malt, which comes from England actually, from the 1860s. It was used in many Victorian beers, and apparently it's a little bit like Vienna, it's apparently a little bit like Maris Otter on steroids from what I've heard. So yeah, this should be really quite interesting actually. If it's like Maris Otter, it should kind of fit in quite well with the sort of flavour profile that we should expect for a Vienna lager. But yeah, we've had some really nice lager beers, generally speaking, from Newbarns Brewery, and the last one that we had, the Hannah, was actually very nice too. So yeah, very curious to see how Newbarns do a Vienna lager. So hopefully this is another good one, as I said, but let's crack on and see how we go. Only my second or third Scottish brewed Vienna lager, as I mentioned. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Newbarns Brewery before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, usually when I'm back home in the motherland of Scotland. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Newbarns Brewery then. So Newbarns Brewery was founded back in 2020, and these guys are based in Leith in Edinburgh. So the four friends behind the brewery are Emma McIntosh, Gordon Mackenzie, Johnny Hamilton and Freddie Bjerkset. So Gordon and Emma are a couple, and they moved down to London from the east coast of Scotland back in 2012. But they hadn't planned on becoming brewers, but Gordon started working at Siren Craft Brewery in Finchampstead in 2013, while Emma started working at Kernel Brewery, which is in the kind of eastern part of London, if I remember correctly, in early 2014. But they met Freddie in 2012, just before he began working at Beavertown, where he was the sales account manager, and Johnny also worked at Beavertown as well, and he was in charge of their Tempest barrel aging project. But Gordon later went on to work at the Kernel Brewery as well, and so as you can see, these guys that are behind this brewery have a hell of a brewing heritage with them. But fast forward a little bit to 2018, Gordon and Emma decided it was time to return to Scotland, and they'd always wanted to start up their own brewery. But by the following year, Freddie and Johnny had joined them in Edinburgh, and it was time for them to get started on Newbarns Brewery. So these guys, as I say, want to focus on the more kind of traditional drinkable styles of beer, could we say, and the branding that they use normally is inspired by a bunch of old beer mats from between the 1940s and 1980s that Emma's dad found at an auction. But yeah, they've been going very well over the last little while. I believe they've got plans to open up a little kind of tap room at their brewery at some point in the fairly near future, so keep your eye out for that. But yeah, probably the most interesting beers that I've had from these guys have been the plain dark beer, which was their big old school imperial stout. The oat lager's a very nice one as well, and the pale ales are really, really damn solid. But yeah, they always do a very, very good lager beer as well. But they kind of do the same thing as Kernel Brewery down in London do. These guys are kind of Scotland's equivalent to the Kernel Brewery, with all these lovely kind of table and session beers and stuff like this. But as I say, over the last little while, they've been expanding a little bit, you know, getting more tanks and stuff like this from what I understand, and they've just been getting their name out there a little bit more. But as of March 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 50 different kinds of beer, and as I say, it's the lagers, the pale ales and stuff like that that you want to try from these guys. Although the plain dark beer, if you come across that one, that is most definitely worth trying. But yeah, that is all I can tell you about Newbarns Brewery for the moment. I'm hoping that I can get these guys on the channel at some point for a Meet the Brewery interview, so we'll need to see about organising that at some point later in the year. But yeah, if you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's crack on then and see how we go with this beer. So this one is, as always, or as most of the time, because the last beer we reviewed was a 330. This is another 448ml can. I believe that I bought this one at, I think it was Grunt and Growler in Glasgow that I got this actually, or Wee Beer Shop. I think it was Grunt and Growler this one came from though. But yeah, this beer was bought at the Grunt and Growler, and you can see it's very nicely presented as you always get. But there you can see on the back, it is one of the Heritage Malt series that I was mentioning earlier that these guys do, and it tells you a little bit about it too. But there you can see the usual branding that you'll get from Newbarns Brewery, Brewers of Leith. So yeah, pretty cool I have to say. But yeah, as we said earlier, this one is a 4.4% Vienna lager brewed with English Chevallier malt. So yeah, a little bit like Maris Otter on steroids, as I said earlier. But yeah, let's crack this guy open and see how we go. So I can't remember exactly what the last Vienna lager was that I reviewed, but when I think about it, I'm sure I've only had one from Brewdog back in the day, and we also had one fairly recently from West Brewery through in Glasgow actually, who specialise in, you know, we mainly German, but of course we should say Central European beers, because they do a few other kind of Austrian and Czech type things as well. But yeah, the Vienna lager is a lovely style of beer that I think is a little bit underappreciated, but I'm glad that people are getting more and more into their lagers these days. But there we go. So yeah, this looks very, very nice, I have to say. So let me just bring this up to the camera so you can have a look. So before the head disappears, I would say that this beer has poured with a little bit over a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy, very slightly fawn coloured head actually. And the beer itself is crystal clear. It's got a lovely kind of copper tint to it. If I put my hand behind it, you can see this is the real colour of the beer. It's got a lovely kind of coppery, gingery type colour to it. But yeah, crystal clear. This is definitely within the range that I've seen from the Vienna area, brewed Vienna lagers that I've had in the past. I really enjoyed doing that. The thing that really surprised me about those was how grainy and things some of them were, but there was a whole spectrum within those beers that we tried. I think we tried about 7 or 8 of the Vienna brewed Vienna lagers, which was great. But yeah, this one certainly looks the part. So in terms of its colour, absolutely, this one has a lovely kind of rich coppery colour. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of your beer too, but when it comes to Vienna lagers, you don't really have to care about barrel aging and adjuncts and things like this. These ones really depend more on the type of malts that you use, and I guess probably the length of the wort boil too. But I think these beers do tend to be brewed with just a standard 90-minute boil. But as we say, a lovely kind of coppery colour. This one, it's not too far away from the likes of a a West Coast double IPA or something like this in terms of its colour. Beautiful, beautiful looking beer, this one. But as I say, this one is crystal clear, and quite a few of the ones that we were having from Austria were actually a little bit hazy, so that's maybe one difference that we should point out actually. But you can see the head has faded away on this one, just to be a nice kind of thin wispy layer over the top, but it's got a lovely kind of thicker ring around the edge of the glass there. But overall, it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. So, yeah, I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of this one, so we can have a look at the aroma and see how we go with that. Let's do this. Oh yeah, that does smell very, very nice. Yeah, I mean, it smells like some of the, it has the right type of profile, we should say that, but it just smells a little bit cleaner than I remember some of the other Austrian ones smelling, of course. And you can smell a wee bit of that more English kind of malty character coming out of it, of course. Like I say, Chevallier is an English type of malt. But yeah, it smells absolutely lovely, this one. You've got a wee bit of the brown bread in there, you've got the sweetness, you've got a little bit of the hoppy character, and just a wee kind of tiny touch of fruitiness as well. My computer's making noises, so I'll just turn that off. But yeah, there we go. So yeah, the malty side of this beer, I think, is very, very nice actually. I really like how this goes together. So let's just break that down for you and describe it a wee bit more kind of in depth actually. Yeah. So, backbone of this beer, absolutely lovely little bit of a kind of grainy, brown bready bread crust in there, which I really enjoy. There's also, there's also a nice little bit of, should we say, there's also a little bit of that kind of straight up kind of, it's almost like a rye bread, but not quite as dark and grainy as that, but you've got a lovely kind of wholemeal brown bready character out of this one, which I really like too. So that's definitely worth checking out in this one. But yeah, lovely little bit of a kind of grainy brown bread crusty kind of note in there as well. Bit of a proper kind of wholemeal sweet brown bread in there with a wee bit of that rye bready character. But then there's one or two little very slight woody notes coming out of this one. It's almost got a wee bit of a Jacob's cream cracker type vibe to it as well. But it definitely, it smells authentically German, this one, which is really interesting because of that English malt that it uses. But this one, I say it smells authentically German, I should say it smells authentically Central European. It really has that typical kind of Central European malt to it. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of Weirmann malt or something like that in this one. It smells very, very familiar, and that makes me think of Weirmann. There's so many breweries use the Bamberg Weirmann malt in there. But yeah, the aroma that comes out of this is absolutely lovely. Bread crust, sweet brown bread, a little bit of rye bread, of course, as we said, one or two woody, very, a little bit of a woody kind of crackery sort of thing going on. And then on top of that, you get a little bit of that McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. I think there is a wee element of a straight up, I think there is a bit of an element of a straight up brown sugar in this one as well. So it has a wee bit of a kind of toasty brown sugary note to it, but also that McVitie's digestive biscuit. I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's a straight up kind of sweet. I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's a straight up sweet caramel that you get out of this one. It is more of a kind of bready, grainy and kind of slightly toasty, biscuity brown sugar that you get out of this. But this was the thing that really surprised me when I tried the Vienna brewed Vienna lagers. I was surprised at how kind of grainy and bready and stuff they were, because the ones that I'd had in the past had actually been very, very sweet. So I'm curious to see how that aroma translates into the flavour that we're going to get when we actually taste the beer. So keep that in mind. Do keep that in mind with this one if you try it yourself. But yeah, glad that I was able to pick this up. I love a Vienna lager. But yeah, I think that's everything that we really need to say about the the malty and yeasty side of things. The only other thing I would say is that the more I smell of it, the more kind of woodiness I get out of the beer. So that is worth keeping in mind too. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, it is kind of what you would expect. There's a little bit of a kind of smooth earthiness to it, which you always expect out of the style. A wee touch of a herbal character and a little bit of a kind of, you do get a little bit of a kind of bright floral aromaticity to it as well, which I can certainly appreciate. But yeah, Austria of course does have its own hop producing regions, so I do wonder if they've maybe sourced some Austrian hops for this. That would be quite interesting to know. But yeah, it does have a little bit of the kind of smoothness there that I've noticed. The Austrian hops tend to be somewhere between the kind of Czech and German ones in my experience. They've got a little bit of the more kind of smoothness and things that you would expect to the German ones, but they do have a wee bit of spiciness that you'd get from the kind of Czech ones. So yeah, I do get a little bit of a more, I do get a little, there's a bit of grassiness in this one, but it's got a wee touch of zest and a wee bit of floral character, but also a little bit of a herbal and earthy vibe to it as well. So it's got a bit of everything that you would expect of these typical noble hops. But of course, if you're interested in seeing these kind of lager beers brewed with English hops, then a brewery you want to check out is Utopia Brewery. They do some really nice lager beers actually. But yeah, this one I think is very, very nice. I really like the aroma that you get out of this. So yeah, a little bit, it leans more towards the grassy side of things the more that I smell of it. It's got a little bit of floral brightness in there too, but definitely some smoother herbal and earthy kind of things coming out of it as well. So yeah, aroma wise, the way this goes together I think works very, very well. Yeah, I do like it. I do like this. So on the fruity side of things, then, I don't think we need to say any more about the hoppy side of the beer. On the fruity side of things, it's quite interesting. I get a little bit of a kind of sultana type vibe out of this one, you know, that dried white, green, grapey character. Definitely a wee bit of that in there. There's a wee touch, there is definitely a wee touch of a kind of, there's a wee touch of a little bit of a red fruity character. This one, I don't know if I want to go and say fig, but it's almost like a kind of slightly candy strawberry kind of thing. So I do get a wee bit of that. I do get a little bit of that out of this beer. But yeah, a little bit of sultana, a little bit of an oily pear kind of thing as well. And yeah, just a wee tiny touch of a kind of red fruity note out of this one, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, interesting smelling beer, this one. As I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one then. So yeah, this one is the Chevallier, a 4.4% Vienna lager from Newbarns Brewery in Leith through in Edinburgh. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh, yeah. That is quite interesting. I'm going to say straight away, compared to other Vienna lagers I've had, this one, it feels lighter and cleaner, but it also feels a little bit more kind of punchy in its grainy characteristics actually, and that's going to be the English malt that does that. So as I always say, sugar the beer around your palate a little bit when you take it in, because that's always, you know, you've always got impact flavours that will fade a little bit over time. But yeah, the first impression that I have of this one is absolutely, this is like a very grainy and almost like dry bread crusty Vienna lager. That's interesting, but it's the bread, it really is the bread crust that comes out of this one on the first tasting. You do get some of the sweeter brown bread and brown sugars and stuff later on, but yeah, I think this one, I do think this one is, this is definitely a little bit, it feels a bit drier and a bit more kind of grainy and things compared to the ones that I reviewed from Austria about a year ago. But I like it. I do like this. It's another very well done beer. And in fairness, what I would say about it is the kind of mouthfeel and the sort of lightness and kind of crispness and graininess that you get out of this, it's actually quite in keeping with some of the other lager beers that we've had. These Newbarns beers are always very clean and always very drinkable, and this one certainly gives you that. We have to say that about it. So yeah, it's definitely, it's not quite as authentic as you're going to get from some breweries, I would say, this one. But it feels, you know, if you had, I probably couldn't do it blind and tell you that's a Newbarns beer. I probably couldn't do that yet, because I've only reviewed about 6 or so, 6 maybe 7 other beers. But you know, when I think about what we've had from the other ones, this is it feels like, it does feel like a Newbarns beer. If that's, maybe that's an odd thing to say, but you know, it has the same characteristics, the sort of lightness, the drinkability, the crispness and stuff like that you would expect from this brewery. So I like this. It feels like a Newbarns take on the Vienna lager, rather than being one that is, you know, exceptionally authentic to what you would get in the Vienna area, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's go with that. But yeah, this is very, very nice. Remember, of course, this beer is a lager, it's not an ale, so lager is by definition a cold temperature fermentation, bottom fermenting yeast that ferments between about 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. Ales, of course, ferment at a higher temperature with a top fermenting yeast 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. So yeah, that is your basic difference. But yeah, this is one of many different types of lager beer. But I like this. I certainly do like how this beer goes about its business. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. So, yeah, let's try and break this one down for you then and describe the flavour a little bit more kind of in depth. But it is quite, it has the flavour profile you'd expect, but like I say, it's a wee bit more kind of grainy in a sense. So, middle third of your palate then. Base layer, you get that nice toasty, almost well-fired morning roll bread crust sort of thing. That forms the backbone of this beer, absolutely. On top of that, you get a slightly thinner layer. Of a kind of like rye, almost like German rye bread, brown bready sort of thing. So yeah, I really like how that goes together. So yeah, you get that nice kind of dry. You get that nice kind of dry bread crusty note out of it. So yeah, nice kind of dry bread crusty note out of it. Thicker brown bready character for sure. But it's still, at the same time, it's not the thickest. But then on top of that, you do get a slightly sweeter brown bready note out of this one, which I do like. So you do get that kind of sweeter side of the bread that you would normally get from Maris Otter. But the main difference between, I guess, this Chevallier malt and the Maris Otter would just be the level of graininess. So yeah, you've got that well-fired bread crust underneath, a thinner layer of kind of thick, of kind of like rye bready character on top of it. Then you've got a slightly sweeter brown bready layer as well. So it's very layered in its backbone. The other thing I would say is that toward the front of that middle third of your palate, toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you do have a little bit of a kind of woody and slightly nutty undertone coming out of this one, which I can certainly appreciate as well. So yeah, I do like how that that goes together in this beer also. But yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me. It gets a thumbs up from me in that particular regard too. So yeah, the way that this one goes about its business from that perspective, I do like as well. But yeah, so on top of the kind of brown bready layer, the sweeter brown bready layer, in the middle of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a circle there, and you get a wee bit of a toasty kind of brown sugary base to it. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of toasty brown sugary base in there. On top of that, you can feel there is a bit of a sweet oily caramel right in the middle of your palate, but yeah, you've got that toasty brown sugary base, and as you move out from that, you start to get a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, you can feel this one. This has actually quite a complex malt base to it, which I really like. I always like it when you get beers that make you think a wee bit, and this one certainly does that. Most beers make me think a little bit because I'm just a big nerd in that sense, but that's by the by. But yeah, the way that the malty character in this one goes together, I think, is really nice. So yeah, grainy, toasty, well-fired bread crust, a more kind of dense, grainy brown bread, a sweeter kind of wholemeal brown bread on top of that, one or two little nutty, woody flavours mixing in with that, particularly towards the front of that middle third of your palate. Then the toasty brown sugary circle, oily caramel in the middle, then a more grainy biscuity character outside of that. So yeah, I like how that goes together in this one. So I think on the I think on that's everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate. Let's focus on the back third of the palate then. Border region between middle third and back third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of that kind of bread crusty build up there. The back of the back third of the palate in there is more of a the back third of your palate has again you get a stronger kind of toasty, well fired bread crust in there. And you can feel that the flavour gets a bit more intense, but remember, more bitter flavours come out further back on the palate than anything else. It gets sweeter the further forward you go. You've got a more thick layer. You do have a thicker layer of kind of brown bready character in there as well. You've got the grainy layer, but then you've also got the sweeter layer on top of that. Then on top of both of these things, that's when you get the yeast. And the yeasty character is really interesting in this because it feels like a slightly more dense, doughy ball of bread, but then the outside of that, it has this almost bread crust that feels even more bitter than the backbone of this beer in a sense. So yeah, the way that goes about its business too, I think is very, very nice. So yeah, the whole malty yeasty side of this beer, I think, is very, very nicely done, and at the same time it still feels quite clean because it's Scottish water. I always say this, the Scottish water always makes the beers feel very clean. But yeah, on the back third of your palate you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller, then as you come further forward it just squashes together that wee bit more and the flavours condensed together. But yeah, I think that covers the malty and yeasty side of things in this beer, which is the most important part of the Vienna lager in my opinion. So let's look at the hoppy side of things. Pardon me, back corner of the palate, the back corners, there is a wee bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward it gets a little bit herbal, and as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate it's definitely got a little bit more of a kind of floral aromaticity to it. There is a nice little bit of a floral vibe to this beer, which I can certainly appreciate. Round the front curve of the palate though, it's a little bit lighter and grassy. And yeah, everything you'd expect from kind of noble hops. I do wonder if it is an Austrian or a Czech hop that's in this one. I wouldn't be surprised at that because it does have a bit of the brightness and grassiness that you would expect of the kind of Czech hops actually. So maybe it's just Sats or Žatec that's in this. I'd love to know what hop it is. But let's look at the fruity side of things. And the front third of your palate. So yeah, front third of the palate then, you've got that nice border region between front third and middle third of your palate. That's got a little bit of a bready build up there. Then the base of that front third of your palate, it's more of the kind of sweeter wholemeal type bread that comes out on that front third of your palate. And on top of that, you've got that oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So toward the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a wee bit of a more you do have a wee bit of a more kind you do have a little bit of that kind of sultana type flavour that I was talking about, the dried white green grapes. There's a bit of as you come further forward, it gets to be a little bit more of a kind of oily, peary sort of thing. I don't get so much in the way of red fruit that I was getting from this one in the aroma. But yeah, I think there's definitely a bit of sultana in there. There is a wee bit of that kind of oily, peary sort of thing. And in fairness, just behind the front tip of the palate, you do get a little bit of that more kind of, you get a bit of zestiness out of the grassy character in this beer, which comes out a wee bit more the further into the aftertaste. But you do have this little bit of kind of zesty kind of character. It's almost got a wee sort of a kind of like lemony sort of thing to it, which is interesting. Maybe a bit more limey. But yeah, there's definitely a wee bit of a kind of citrusy zest to this beer. But yeah, I really like how this one, goes about its business actually. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me. This one, in terms of the flavour profile, like I say, it is very authentic. It feels, the Vienna lagers can have a little bit of a grainy, bready character to them, but this one for me feels, it's almost, the graininess is almost just a little touch bitter in this one compared to some of the ones that I had from the Vienna area, but I do wonder if that is influenced a little bit by how clean the beer is and how kind of clean the mouthfeel is. So that's food for thought there. But let's round off the review with a look at that mouthfeel then. For me, this is top end of light bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth on this. It feels, you know, really nice and clean. It's got a slight little bit of oily character to it, which you're always going to get from a beer which is kind of, can we say, brown sugary leaning in this case. You're always going to get that from these type of beers. But yeah, it's nice. It is just a nice, easy drinking one, this, actually, I have to say. But that is what we expect from Newbarns Brewery. So, on the bitter side of things, I think this beer's got to be about 30 IBU. I think there's a good bit of bitterness from the grainy side of things, but there's also a little bit of hoppy bitterness to it. So I think this is about 25-30 IBUs. The malt base, like we said, has got a bit of grainy bitterness underneath. It's got a bit of smoothness and a slight in the middle, and then a bit of sweetness on top. Again, the sweetness has a little bit of toasty character to it. The fruity side of the beer is slightly more kind of oily, but yeah, the way that this one goes together, I think, is very nice. It's a solid take on the Vienna lager. As I say, not the most authentic one I think that I've come across, but if we're thinking about Newbarns Brewery and their vibe that they give out in their beers, it's like a Newbarns take on the Vienna lager rather than being extremely authentic. I think that's a nice way to summarise this one. So yeah, let's leave it at that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed my take on this one. This was the Chevallier Vienna Lager at 4.4% ABV from Newbarns Brewery in Leith in Edinburgh. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below, and let me know what your favourite beers are from Newbarns Brewery, of course. And do make sure you check out their social media, check out my social media, but most importantly, go and try some of the beers and let me know any other Vienna lagers that you guys think I should check out as well. But until the next time, slàinte just now, and I'll see you guys later. Slàinte, skål, cheers, make sure you try some Vienna lagers.